Welcome back to another Frost Devlog. A 2D, top-down, Souls-like game I'm making in Unity. Since the last devlog I added a bunch of different things. Starting with the most interesting additions. A custom UI cursor. I know, game-changing. Going to player changes, I've changed the player idle and walking animation by removing the transition between keyframes, making the sprites snap to position which fit the pixel art aesthetic much better. And as a final result of the animation changes, the player feels much better to control now. Now after killing enemies we can also visually see how we collect their void essence, which is the main currency of the game. And by main currency, I mean the only currency. Then I added the option to use healing flasks or potions, still not sure what to call them. Probably flasks, so it will be just like Dark Souls. Then I added the option to rest at the warp, which resets your health, flasks, and the enemies. As a final addition to the player controller I added an attack buffer. I don't know why I'm showing you footage here because this isn't really a thing you can show, but it's there. Moving on to the weapon changes, I made the trails better by just adding more of them. Also I don't think I mentioned this before, but all the weapons have their colliders set only on the blade part of the weapon. Meaning you actually have to hit your enemies with the pointy end of the weapon instead of the hilt. Sounds cool and all, but this won't really be noticeable for most of the weapons, except for some. The best example for this is the spear. The spear by itself gives you a huge advantage by its length alone. However you must position well, because if they get too close to you, you won't be able to hit them. Then I also added a new property to the weapons called stagger damage. I will talk about this in a moment. Moving to the enemy changes, I changed the enemy following logic, so now they actually have a logic, instead of before where they just followed the player in a straight line. The new logic follows the player's last seen position and avoids obstacles, by moving around them. As a result you can kite one enemy around another, which I think is really cool. The algorithm itself is called context steering and if you wish to know more, you should check Sunny Valley Studios tutorial on the subject. Then I also added a stagger mechanic to the enemies. Each enemy now has a number of stagger points. You deplete these points by hitting them with your weapons as you probably imagined. The amount of force points they lose in each hit is determined by the weapon's property stagger damage I mentioned earlier. When the enemies lose all force points they are staggered, meaning they can't move or attack for some moments. After that the force points are reset and they can be staggered again, if they survive for that long. Then I implemented the armor system and the first armor set, the Aspen set. If you missed the previous devlog, here's a quick rundown how armor works. We can have 3 different armor pieces equipped at once, the helmet, chest and leg piece. Each part gives a certain number of defense, which is a flat reduction of damage received. So if you have 2 defense and the enemy deals 3 damage, you lose 1 health point. And similarly, if you have 4 defense instead, you would receive 1 damage, instead of 0, because after testing the original idea for 5 seconds I realized that all the weaker enemies would become something less than obsolete in the original implementation. With the new tweak, you now at least know somebody is poking you. Moving on, each armor piece has a certain bonus, the Aspen set bonus is movement speed. Then I added a mini boss with some new movesets. After some play testing, I realized he was too easy, which by itself is no problem. The problem however, was in the reward you get for defeating him. And that reward was the Aspen set. The armor set is just too overpowered for the remaining part of the area, and not because of the defense, but because of the bonus movement speed it offers. After some consideration I removed the reward and moved it to a later area, which doesn't exist yet. And for the last thing, some environmental stuff. That's all for now, stay safe and have a nice day.